Welcome back. We are now going through chapter two again, but this time we're going to be looking for connections and we're going to be learning for things that connect to today's learning target. Almost always, the learning target and the TDA writing prompt at the top of every single page. And I'll show you, right? Here's the prompt that you'll find on every single page, right? Of every single story. Boom, right there in the center. That'll usually help you to figure out what the day's learning target is about. And if there's anything different, usually your instructor will let you know. So we're going to be looking for connections using these blue magnifying glasses. And we're going to be looking for parts that connect with the learning target using this check mark. Now, let's say you have a broken computer or something else has happened, you ran out of power, whatever. All right, you'll be writing, either taking notes on paper, or if you were given a printout, you'll be using, you'll draw magnifying glasses or you'll make a check mark, just like all these students are doing on their papers and in their textbooks. All right, so let's get into it. Our finding connections using our blue magnifying glasses, and then of course seeing what connects with the prompt using our check marks, or today's learning target using our check mark. All right, let's get in there. So we already highlighted these parts, right? This is the book overall. This is the chapter. We already talked about diffuse mode versus focused mode, right? We highlighted those similarities. We went through the prompt. We're looking for strategies that help us as learners. So that's what we're going to be going as we go along. Is there anything about strategies and learners? Sure, right? We learned that diffuse mode connects with focused mode. They share a relationship, right? And we can use diffuse mode here and think about our how when we use diffuse modes or focus modes for our own learning. So kind of all of our big ideas are clustered right there. Perfect. Easy does it. So what on this page, is there a connection? Is there a connection between anything? Well, I can see already that there's a connection of words, right? I see distracted here and I see distracted there. Is there anything relating to me getting learning strategies together? Well, let's take a look at the page. Has your teacher or your mom or dad ever told you to pay attention, to focus? You've probably told yourself to do it. That's because it's easy to become distracted. Sometimes whatever is going on outside the window seems more interesting than what's right in front of you. You can't help but think ahead of things like friends or lunch. Getting distracted is always bad, right? Maybe not. Take a look at the chess game in the following picture and look at the boy on the left. He's playing against the guy on the right. The boy's rude, isn't he? Typical 13-year-old, no concentration. Ever heard adults say things like that? They usually blame it on smartphones. All right, so they kind of show you that maybe being distracted can be a good thing sometimes, right? So I'm going to put my check mark right next to maybe not. Let's see. 13-year-old Magnus Carlsen, legendary chess genius Garry Kasparov, playing speed chess at Reykjavik Rapid in 2004. Kasparov was surprised to see that Magnus, right? And here's Kasparov here. There's my connection, and here's Kasparov right here. There's a picture of him. Is one of the greatest chess players of all time. Magnus is not concentrating, so he must have no chance of winning, right? Amazingly, Kasparov didn't win a chess match. It was a tie between the world's best chess player. He couldn't defeat what appeared to be a hopelessly distracted 13-year-old. Surprise! Sometimes we need to lose concentration so we can think more clearly. Well, it's in italics. It's a strategy that zoning out can occasionally help us. As long as we don't do it for too long, not all the time, can be useful when you're learning or problem solving. So I'm going to put my check mark there, but it sort of encompasses all this. So I'll put it all over this. Soon after this photo was taken, Magnus returned to the table and focused on the game again. He had taken a little break so he could focus better when he returned. The message of this chapter is that sometimes you need to be less focused in order to become a better learner. The message of this chapter tells us exactly what they are asking here. Identify a strategy from chapter 2 and 2 strategies from chapter 3 that help you as a learner. Well, here's one. Sometimes you have to be purposeful about when you are not paying attention. So you've got two ways of thinking. In the last chapter, I mentioned the word neuroscience, the science of the brain. Neuroscientists use new brain scanning technology. Well, I see brain scanning technology here, and I see a brain scan right there, or the technology to make that possible. To look inside to understand it better. Neuroscientists have discovered that your brain works in two different ways. We'll call these two ways of working the focused mode and diffuse mode. Both modes are important in helping you to learn, right? If they're both important, there's a relationship between diffuse and the relationship between focused. Focus mode. When you're in focus mode, it means you're paying attention. For example, you might be trying to figure out a math problem, or you might be looking at and listening to your teacher. Your focus when you're playing a video game, putting together a puzzle, or learning words from a different language. When you're focusing, you're putting specific parts of your brain to work. Which parts are working depends on what you're doing. For example, when you're doing multiplication problems, focusing will use different parts of the brain than when you're speaking. When you're trying to learn something new, strategy alert, you must first focus intently on it in order to turn on those parts of the brain and get the learning process started. It looks like there's an overlap between what's important and what connects with the prompt up there, what connects with today's learning target. Please make sure that your screen looks just like Mr. Surface's. Take the time to do that now, please. Very good. Diffuse mode. If that's focus mode, this is slide 10. If that's focus mode, what is diffuse mode? Diffuse mode is when your mind is relaxed and free. Diffuse, relaxed. You're thinking about nothing in particular. You're in diffuse mode when you're daydreaming or doodling. Just for fun, if your teacher tells you to concentrate, you've probably slipped into diffuse mode. Not too much there about today's learning target, so I'm just going to put it above the term diffuse mode because I do know that's important overall. When you're in diffuse mode, you're gently using other parts of your brain that are mostly different from the parts you use when you're focusing. The diffuse mode helps you make imaginative connections between ideas. Creativity often seems to pop out of using the diffuse mode, right? I see someone being creative looking away from the work at hand right there. She's in diffuse mode. There's a connection. It turns out that your brain has to go back and forth between focus and diffuse modes in order to learn effectively. As it turns out, it has to go, right? It seems not only important, but it also seems to connect with today's learning target. Let's play pinball. Well, there's a pinball machine here. Let's talk about to understand focus and diffuse mode. Let's turn to the game called pinball. It's easy to play. You just pull back on a plunger. Once you let the plunger, it hits a ball up onto the table. Your score points as the ball bounces around on the rubber bumpers. Meanwhile, flashing lights and wacky sounds go off. Use the flippers on the lower portion of the table to keep the ball up and bouncing as long as possible. Right? So pinball is going to help us understand a strategy using focus and diffuse modes. Pinball tables are kind of like your brain. Right? Here's a pinball table here. Here's a pinball table here that's kind of like the brain. Their bumpers can be closer or farther apart depending on the table. When the bumpers are close together, it's like your brain. In focus mode, the ball bounces around rapidly in one small area before running out of energy and falling down. Now imagine that your mental ball leaves a trail when it travels. That's like your focus mode. You make trails in your brain when you're focused. These trails are laid when you first learn something new and begin to practice using it. For example, let's say you already know multiplication. If I asked you to work a multiplication problem, your thoughts would move along the same multiplication trails that had already been laid in your brain. You see what I mean? Take a look at these pictures. It seems like these pictures kind of capture a big idea here, right? Maybe a strategy or how we can be more strategic when we're learning the connection we already found. Slide 15. So as you go along through the rest of this chapter, I would like you pretty please to find connections. Oftentimes there'll be a connection here. I see diffuse mode here. I see diffuse mode here, right? You'll be able to find those connections as you go along. You'll be able to find those parts that connect with the prompt as you go along. So you'll be dragging your check marks and you'll be dragging your connections as you go along on each page. After you are done reading through this chapter a second time, you should make sure that you have your connections, your big ideas, your questions. All of these pages should be annotated and complete. Take a moment now to go back through the chapter entirely and to make sure that each page is fully annotated. Please take the time to do that now. All right, we're back. All right, so now that we've had a chance to go through all the different parts of the chapter, Now what I need y'all to do is we're going to take a look at a prompt. And this prompt is going to be asking after chapter 2. And I'm just going to show you what a TDA might look like based on chapter 2. You won't be writing a TDA yet, but I do want us to start thinking about it. So please get your highlighter now. Okay? And let's take a look at the prompt and highlight parts that seem important, and we'll highlight them with the color yellow. Make a yellow line right there real quick. Perfect. All right. At the end of chapter 2, Dr. Barbara Oakley writes, when you're in diffuse mode, your brain is working on the problem quietly in the background. Let's highlight that first part. When you're in diffuse mode, your brain is working on the problem quietly in the background, although you'd often not be aware of it. Write an essay analyzing. Oh, there's an important academic vocabulary word. I'm going to highlight that. Analyzing. The relationship. I'm going to highlight that word, relationship, between focused and diffuse modes of thinking. Focused and diffuse modes of thinking. Use evidence from the text to support your answer. So let's just take a moment and we're going to click on the text here. I'm going to click up here. And I'd like you to rewrite some of those important words that might help you to answer this question for your thesis. So it would include the word relationship. It would include the word focused. Mommy is having sweet burgers. Yes, she is. All right, Alexa, stop. So relationship, focus, diffused, and then finally a last important word would be thinking. Now we've got to analyze this relationship a few times in a row, right? Because it's a TDA, it should be 5 paragraphs long. Well, here we know that when we finish the essay, the thesis is the God of our essay. That's why I have God there. Could you draw a little hat on God there, right? And you can draw another little hat on God here. The God of your essay is the thesis. It tells you what every single part of the essay is going to be about, right? So let's go ahead and click here. Then we're going to put this down to the conclusion as well, because your conclusion and your thesis are always going to look very similar. Boom. Now, how can we break it down? Well, here's how you might break a full essay down like this. Let's take a look together. Here's a sample thesis. The relationship between the focused and diffuse modes of thinking is important because the brain needs to go back and forth to learn well. The diffuse mode can help with difficult problems, and the focus mode can help start the learning process. So each of these next 3 body paragraphs all help to answer that main prompt right up here that I highlight there, right? So let's just get the topic sentences in there. The relationship between the focus and diffuse modes of thinking is important because the focus mode can help start the learning process. I'm going to put that here in my body paragraph right here. All right, I'm going to bring in the sides, I think. Hold on. Okay, so what I did is I went in here and I highlighted these, and that helps you make the text bigger or smaller so it can fit where you need it to fit. And you can see the little lines here on the side. I just grab the block, adjust it so it's in there, then I can adjust the text again. Right, I click it, highlight it all, and then boom, I can put it right there. The relationship between the focus and diffuse modes of thinking is important because the focus mode can help start the learning process. All right, please take a moment to write that full topic sentence in the paragraph that I have it here. Take the time to do that now. All right, and then we'll highlight the little sentence that we made. All right, let's highlight the word focus mode. And why one of the relationships is it starts the learning process, which can make the diffuse mode that much more useful. All right, the rest we're just going to take some quick notes, right? Our next body paragraph would be down here. Here's its topic sentence I have highlighted in blue. The relationship between the focus and diffuse modes of thinking is important because diffuse mode can help with difficult problems. So here, I'm just going to put in text, diffuse mode can help with difficult, can help with return difficult problems, right? That helps me to explore that relationship between diffuse and focus mode. And then the last body paragraph that could respond to that prompt. The relationship between focus and diffuse modes of thinking is important because the brain needs to go back and forth. I'll put that right here. The brain needs to go back and forth, especially for a difficult problem. The brain needs to go back and forth. Please take a moment to make your screen look like mine. Nice. So let's take a closer look at just one body paragraph that would be responding to this. And it's going to be right over here. We're going to keep on drawing. All right. So let's get yellow. If you just put a little yellow dot right by step 1, right by step 2, and put a yellow dot by step 3. Prompt. At the end of chapter 2, Dr. Barbara Oakley writes, when you're in diffuse mode, your brain is working on the problem quietly in the background, although you're not aware of it. Write an essay analyzing the relationship, I'm going to highlight that again, between the focused and diffuse modes of thinking. I'm going to highlight that whole part. Now, do we have a picture of a focused and diffuse mode? We do, and it's right here. I'm going to put a dot next to the focus side of the picture and a dot on the diffuse side of the picture. The relationship between the focused and diffuse modes of thinking is important because the focus mode can help start the learning process. Well, I'm going to switch up my colors now. The learning process and starting it looks like it's being illustrated for us with a photo over there, a photo of that girl reading the book. Let's highlight that book with a letter V here. The brain switches between paying attention and letting our attention wander. If a learner sets out to learn something for the first time or if a topic is difficult, then we use the focus mode. Here's a picture right here of the focus mode. Here's a picture of diffuse mode. Please put a dot next to both. When you are trying to learn something new, you must first focus intently on it in order to turn on those parts of the brain and get the learning process started. Well, now that seems important to me, so I'm going to switch to the color blue. I'm going to put a blue dot next to this trophy and put a square around the focus mode, or as square as I can get it. And I'm going to put the quote, you must first focus intently in order to turn on those parts of the brain to get the learning process started. I'm going to highlight all that blue. This crucial first step leads to useful diffuse thinking. If a learner skips straight to the diffuse thinking, then the parts of the brain responsible for learning are not turned on. The focused first step is important because it makes diffuse mode that much more helpful and dynamic. Here it seems like there's a relationship between these three pictures. A strong brain, I'm going to switch to green and put a green dot right above this brain. That ain't green. There we are. I'm going to put a box around this brain lifting, and then down here I've got my focus mode. Put a dot on the focus mode, and I'm going to put a dot on the diffuse mode, right? Because all of those are kind of mentioned here. So I'm going to put a little arrow there. Please take a moment to have your screen look like mine. Nice work. All right. We are now going to finish up with reading that paragraph again and seeing if it answers that prompt at the top in blue. Your job for this slide is to click on the Vocaroo, just like last time, just like earlier. Click the microphone. Once you do that, it'll start recording everything that you or anyone around you starts to say. Then you read everything that's underlined in red. So you'd read it. Write an essay analyzing the relationship between the focused and diffuse modes of thinking. And then it has looks like the opening of the paragraph underlined. The relationship between the focused and diffuse modes of thinking is important because the focus mode can help start the learning process. The brain switches between paying attention, and then you would read, would you give this TDA paragraph response a 4 out of 4, 3 out of 4, 2 out of 4, 1 out of 4, or a 0? So you would say something along the lines of, I would give this, there's the red right there, TDA paragraph response, a 4 out of 4 because, and you'd elaborate. Then you stop it. You click save and share just like earlier. You click the overlapping boxes, and then you put that right over here. Boom. Then you're donezo funzo, and we'll start chapter 3 later. Excellent work, everybody.